Similar to the last few Xbox interviews I've been discussing, Sony had an interview, and I have some thoughts. Stay tuned and we'll get into them. Oh man, this is coming. Get ready, everybody. But before we do, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So my hot take on this interview was that it was actually a pretty good interview. He actually said a lot of interesting stuff. So this one was with Jim Ryan. And I've said in the past that Jim Ryan does not usually hit the right tone with interviews. It feels like he seriously can't go through an interview without saying a thing that people latch onto and just lambast him for. Partially due to the discourse online, but also a little bit because Sony has had some controversial policies as of late. So this interview, however, I think he said a lot of stuff that made sense. I don't think it was too crazy. So I'm going to go through some of the quotes from the interview and just talk to you about my reaction to them. So one of the commonalities of these acquired studios is that we have had a working relationship with them for several years before the acquisition, which means that we have a deeper understanding of them. We know their operating mode advantages and development capabilities, and we also know where they need to improve, which makes it easier to merge studios. This process has never been easy, but it is far more better than buying some studios that we know little about. And I mean, that sounds great. That sounds actually like a really good acquisition strategy. Make sure you work with somebody before you actually go ahead and make that acquisition. You kind of know what to expect. You can find ways that that company can potentially improve. Really, really solid answer from Jim Ryan, and I actually admire that. I admire that from both Sony and Xbox. I think Housemarque and Sony working together, it's such a no-brainer. I'm really, really happy about the Housemarque acquisition because Housemarque's honestly one of my favorite Sony developers. They made still my game of the year, Returnal, although we got some cool stuff coming later in the year that might usurp Returnal as my game of the year. Looking at you, Forza Horizon 5. But anyway, they also said how many studios may spend a lot of time many studios may spend a lot of time developing a game as the company's leadership, how to keep your patience. This is translated from another language, by the way, so the questions may seem a little strangely phrased. But anyway, Jim Ryan said, "This is a very good question. I think this is similar to a previous question that is, what is the importance of PlayStation Studios, especially to their ability to develop games and demonstrate platform advantages? Therefore, people like me need to keep those two things in mind and realize that it is better to wait and have a great game than to rush and have a game that is okay or quite good." And this is the quote that got him a little bit of heat on the internet. "Players only remember best games rather than okay games. If it is a best game, players may want a sequel, and they will also want to buy a sequel, but no one really cares about a game that is only okay. Of course, due to financial and product portfolio considerations, we will also give pressure to studios to deliver a certain product within the expected time, but in general, we don't want products that are okay, we want the best." And what he's saying there is something Nintendo has said in the past, and basically, a good game will always be good and a bad game will always be bad. This is a sentiment that has been echoed, but it's that one statement that Jim Ryan said that people latched onto, and actually the outlet that wrote this article ran with it as their headline. So of course that's what people are going to latch onto. But he said, players only remember best games rather than okay games. And the reason people latch onto that is because I remember a lot of terrible games that I played, like just god-awful games. And the one that I used as an example on Twitter was, I said, I totally get where Jim Ryan's coming from. I get the point that he's making, but I do remember the terrible games. He's saying people want to remember the best experiences and go from there. This is the thing, man. He can't go through an interview without having like one sentence that just kind of makes most people stop in their text like, I remember a lot of the bad games that I played, right? For me, it was X-Men on the NES. I remember when I was a kid, like you get your one rental a week, you go into the rental store and you're like, oh, I was a huge X-Men fan. X-Men, the animated series and everything was on. I rented that. X-Men on the NES is god-awful. You play as these little sprites that sort of look like the character. You're in worlds that have nothing to do with X-Men. It is a terrible game. I think it was one of those Sunsoft games. And then you have the AVGN who specifically talks about those games that pique our nostalgia memories, but were awful. Like the original Ninja Turtles is one of the AVGN's, best posts ever. But anyway, I wanted to talk about this statement. Like, it's funny because I actually get what he's saying, but that one sentence just sort of, people were like, wait, what? Anyway, that was sort of one, because then I asked people on Twitter, like, hey, so like, what's an awful game that you actually remember? Just because I think about AVGN and all the videos that he's made and my experiences with bad games. I remember when I was at Screw Attack having to review Oni Chambara. It's like, how do I describe Oni Chambara? You're a samurai bikini wearing lady and you kill zombies. It like opens with a shower scene. It seems very purposeful what they're going for. Twitter's down, which is probably for the best. I don't care. Anyway, yeah, so I asked a bunch of people and they all gave these fun memories of an old, terrible game that they played. So, all right, let's continue with this interview, though. But that was the one question that probably a lot of people latched onto because the outlet ran with that as their headline. But I did like this interview. So just like the Phil Spencer interview, Phil Spencer's been doing the rounds. Jim Ryan did this interview, and hopefully they do more. I want to do more. But anyway, that's one I would have followed up on. So that's one of those questions where the interviewer asked it, and I'm like, man, I really wish they would have followed up. I would have just said, like, I think a lot of us have bad memories of terrible games and we remember those games. Could you elaborate a little more? Like maybe you mean this, and then, he would probably be like, yeah, that's what I mean. Anyway, they said the production of a game is very much like film production. Will you personally participate in the production process and give your opinion, or is it someone else's responsibility to do this? My internet's going crazy right now, so hopefully not everything falls apart. Ryan, no, I don't do this because my suggestions are not good. Even if I give them, I hope that the developers will ignore them. Of course, I think you are right. We have to consider the budget and time cost. It is indeed very similar to making a movie, but I think if you have built a mature development team, you have to employ people without any doubt. You have to trust your team and support them. This is how we operate the PlayStation Studio. We give the freedom to express their creativity, and we believe that they will give us a corresponding return and deliver the best games. So I agree with the sentiment. I do agree that you should trust people who work for you. But recently, there was this whole studio conversation about the sequel to Days Gone and how the studio said, hey, we want to make a sequel to Days Gone. And there was another developer who worked at Sony who said, hey, I want to work on this remaster of Last of Us or whatever. And they gave it to a different studio. I don't remember off the top of my head who it was. So it's interesting to hear him say that. And this is the exact example where I wish the interview would have said, well, you say you trust developers. So could you elaborate on what happened with Days Gone 2? Because the studio wanted to work on Days Gone 2 and, they were given another assignment. What happened there? And it's a perfect lead in. It's a perfect follow up. It gives him a chance to address that question. And that didn't happen. So like sometimes when you read interviews, like pulling back the curtain a little bit, when you're interviewing people like this, they're like, you have 10 minutes. So get as many questions in as you can, or you're allowed to ask 18 questions. So try and get them in as fast as you can. Maybe they never had an opportunity to follow up. Maybe this was text-based only. So they got their response and they weren't allowed to do follow-ups. But that is one follow-up I would have liked to see addressed. And just like that was just off the top of my head. Anyway, how would you define a best game? Jim Ryan said, I think a best game can arouse certain emotions of the players, such as making the player feel excited, feel the adrenaline rush, or feel happy or sad. I think best gaming experience should allow players to enter an immersive experience in the game, allowing players to fully integrate into the game and experience different emotions. I actually totally agree with him here. And Sony is one of the best. Their game companies that work within Sony, they make some of the most compelling story-driven games of anybody. And they've really, really owned that market. And while I don't agree with Jim Ryan's philosophy of telling them to go ham and only do AAA, because I worry that experimentation is going to be lost, I agree with what he's saying here. The best games are any video game that evokes a physical, emotional response within your body, physical like sadness or happiness or laughter. Those are the best games. Those are the games that we truly remember and cherish. And that's what he's referencing with that previous question about bad games. We remember bad games because they elicit the wrong kind of emotional response, usually anger and frustration or disappointment, right? He's talking about games. The best games are games that have positive or at least emotionally positive things. Like sadness can be emotionally positive with the definition I'm using. Like I'm sure during certain events, during games, you feel sad, right? But you remember that because you went on this journey with the characters and you were able to experience this emotion and have a reaction to the characters that you've interacted with so long. And I actually cut this interview down, believe it or not. I feel like I'm reading the whole thing, but I do know that I went through and I took the ones that really made me think and made me consider about game development. And that's why I actually think this is one of the best Sony interviews Jim Ryan has done in a long time. It's really, really nice to read and just sort of hear, because my main criticisms are I really wish there were follow-up questions. There's like 2 or 3 follow-up questions that needed to happen because he was giving good answers, honestly. Anyway, so what else did he say here? I feel that if our team can launch a best game like this within half a year after a launch of the PS5, what about 3 or 4 years later? I feel very excited when I think of this. He's talking about Ratchet and Clank. Like, look how good Ratchet and Clank looks. What are they going to be able to do in 3 or 4 years? And that also has me really excited for gaming. So he then goes and talks, new IP is the lifeblood of any entertainment industry, but it is very difficult to create a new IP. We are lucky on the PlayStation platform. The most recent, Ghost of Tsushima from Sucker Punch, is a very successful IP. Horizon Zero Dawn and Guerrilla Games is also a successful one, and Days Gone performed well in the market. The Astrobot Rescue Mission on PSVR also has very good results, which should be available in the Chinese market now. I'm very happy that we can do this in the past few years, but it requires great courage and the courage to bear financial risk. It also requires trust in the studio. So he's bringing up trust again with the studios. That's interesting. See, man, I really want to hear that follow-up answer. Like, how would he address that? Because that was so controversial for so long. It's a missed opportunity, in my opinion. So hopefully somebody else gets the chance. If your studio is doing well, then your confidence in the studio will grow over time and you will be more willing to take risks and find the right time. Our relationship with the studio is in a period that I call a healthy circle. We need products, are willing to invest, and are willing to take risks. At the other end of this circle is the reputation of PlayStation studios in the industry. The interaction between the game world is very close and positive, so players will also care about PlayStation studios and are willing to buy their products. Of course, it is difficult to form such a virtuous circle. We work closely with independent game studios and will provide them with some support in terms of development, funding, and marketing. I think these are all different question blocks that were in the interview. So this is one that I would have wanted to follow up on. These independent teams are usually very small, about 10 to 20 people. Though supporting these studios, we are also incubating game products and establishing relationships with these studios. Perhaps they will be the next generation of 3A game developer, AAA game developers. Well, maybe in 5 years or 10 years, our relationship with these independent game studios will be different. So on the independent game studios comment, there's no doubt it's been all over the place. Independent game developers have been talking about how difficult it has been to work with Sony to get their game featured in the store, to make sure their game is findable, about the fees associated. That is such a softball, easy follow-up. Recently, there was a Twitter trend where indie developers were talking about, some difficulties with the PlayStation Store being able to find their game, fees of $25,000. Like, there was no question about the crossplay question. Like, recently in court documents, there was a crossplay slide that was revealed that wasn't supposed to be. Are you still charging developers for crossplay? Like, those are follow-up questions. Like, you can ask a question like that respectfully, and they can choose not to respond it. I don't feel like the way that I just said it was combative or whatever. But those are questions that I really, really want to hear Jim Ryan or Herman Hulst address, because they should have a good answer for it. Like, if they believe that charging for crossplay is how it should be, or if they're the big one is if they're addressing the problem that independent game studios brought up during that Twitter thread, that is an awesome opportunity for them to say, we saw the thread, we're addressing that internally. Here are changes that we're planning to make. It might take time. It's like when I asked Phil Spencer about the localization question. Just hearing that they're actually talking about it and looking at it goes such a long way. I really hope this is the start of a round of interviews, because I have to imagine there's other interview people out there who want to ask these questions, right? Like for me, the crazy thing is we talk about all these industry things on this channel, and it's just like, I want somebody, I don't care who it is. If it's not me, anybody, just ask the tough questions. Just ask them straight up. You don't have to beat around the bush. You don't have to like be sneaky about it. Just be like, this happened. Everybody was talking about it. How do you respond to that? The worst you're going to get is no comment. The best you're going to get is a response that explains what's going on internally. I'm sorry, I'm kind of going on a rant here about interviews and such. But anyway, the final one that I put was, we have more than 100 million players on PS4 and PS5, which is a huge number. What we need to pay attention to is the game time of players. When talking about competitors, we are actually competing with others for people's time. Any form of entertainment that also requires users to spend time is competition, not just other game products. Everyone has limited entertainment time. Trust me, I know about that more than anybody else. More than like anybody who's a new father, or just you're working 2 jobs or something like that, you know all about limited time and limited entertainment time, especially. Just anybody who has a crazy schedule. I don't mean to like eliminate anybody from that, of course. Anyway, playing PlayStation is an option, and going to a theater is also an option. Therefore, what we need to do is ensure that the entertainment we provide is interesting and attractive, as I said before. It's interesting that he brings up the competition, because again, he's saying that the competition is really, really vast right now. It's other console manufacturers, it's movies, it's everybody. And he hit the nail on the head. So again, I just want to recap. I actually really, really like this interview with Jim Ryan. I read the whole thing. I like that one quote. That's nothing. It's just a small thing that was like, he was probably talking conversationally. And I don't mean to make excuses for him. I feel like people latched onto it too much. That's not even the story. It's actually the questions. Like with the Xbox thing, everybody latched onto the controller thing and nobody talked about the $200 billion industry that we're in right now. Like, we're not even scratching the surface of what these companies could be making. It's like, yeah, let's make laugh at me for my silly graph, right? But meanwhile, there's this huge pie, and we're looking at like 2 companies that are taking a smaller chunk of it than they could. It's going to continue to grow. It's really, really interesting. I really, really like this interview. I hope there are follow-up interviews, and if anybody gets a chance, I really hope you ask some of those tough questions that have just been sort of going around on the internet lately. What are you doing to fix the independent game studio problem would be one of the questions. They bring up trusting their studios. I would ask about the Days Gone team and how they wanted to work on Days Gone 2. They've been very public about that. Like, is that ever going to happen? That's an easy softball. And there was one other one in there sort of about like just getting clarity on his people don't remember bad games, because I think he clarifies it like way later in the interview out of that piece. But anyway, great stuff. If you're a Sony fan, I bet you thought I was going to get all spicy or something, didn't you? Well, I got you. I actually like the interview. It's cool. It's cool, and I hope people follow up on it. So this video ended up being 20 minutes long. I kind of went all over the place, but that is the end of the news part. I'm going to talk about channel stuff here for just a second. So if you like the video, hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to hit the bell. Thank you so much. Memberships are turned on. If you want to become a member, hit that join button right now. And I said it in the channel update video. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. I went ahead and I actually created the store thing for merchandise that YouTube offers. So it's there. I don't care if you don't buy it, but they let me do first month 15% off. And I actually went through and I looked at all the designs. I'm like, what works well with the logo? What color schemes work? What don't? I turn off the ones that don't work. Check it out. If you like any of this stuff, great. It's 15% off for the first month it's on. The link is in the description. I don't know how it works with YouTube and all that stuff. This is new uncharted territory for me. So again, I'm trying it out. And if you're a member actually, and you have any feedback about the membership program, what you like, what you don't, send me a DM on Twitter. My DMs are open. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me. Or I don't know, leave a comment on this video and I'll be sure to check the member comments on this one because I want to hear your feedback on how that's going also. So yeah, that was some of the stuff that I said that I would do in that other video, but man, this Sony interview was great. I did not expect to make a 20-minute long video about it though. So I'm going to get out of here. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. It seems like every day we're getting a new interview. It is so hot in this room, by the way. I have to figure out the air conditioning in this room or I'm going to sweat to death. All right, I'm getting out of here. I'll catch you for the next one, everybody. Have a great day. See you soon. I really, really appreciate you watching. I appreciate you subscribing. Bye for now.